Good morning. Joseph, he's probably one of my favorite Bible characters. I know you all know the story very well, but please don't tune me out. I learned something from his story that I have really helped me. I think it will help you as well. If you'll just pay attention, don't turn it off because you say, I know all about Joseph. I know about him too, but I still learned something through this, and I hope you will too. I've been learning a lot through this time that we've had at home, that God uses circumstances in our life to bring about his perfect will. So I want to take you on this journey, a life path that God led Joseph down. Joseph's journey started out smoothly. He was a favorite child. He was loved by his father. But the road that he traveled soon would get very rocky and bumpy and even dangerous. But we can see that God was with him every step. God must have thought very highly of Joseph because he dedicated 13 chapters in Genesis to tell his story. You can find his story in Genesis chapter 37 through 50. But I'm just going to walk you through this journey Joseph took to show you how God uses circumstances that we think are bad to bring about good. Joseph went from being the favorite child to being hated by his brothers. They were very jealous of him. They were jealous he was the favorite and that he would get special gifts from his dad that they didn't get, and they were upset that Joseph told him in a dream that he had that they bowed down to him. In fact, even his father was upset about that. And the Bible says in Genesis 37:8 that they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. But I want to point something out here. If it wasn't for his brother's jealousy, they would never have conspired to kill him. And if they had never been jealous, they never would have thrown him into a pit. And if they had never thrown him into a pit, the timing would not have been right to sell him to some Midianite merchantmen who were just happening to pass by at that exact time. If he had not been sold to the merchantmen, then Joseph would have never been brought to Egypt. Now let's continue on Joseph's journey. It doesn't look like a great trip so far. It started out okay, but maybe by now Joseph is thinking, maybe I took a wrong path somewhere here. Continuing on. If Joseph had never been brought to Egypt, he never would have been sold to Potiphar. Now Joseph's journey gets a little bit easier here. That rough uphill climb has finally leveled out and things are getting a little bit easier. We see that he gains favor with Potiphar, and in Genesis 39:3 it says that his master saw that the Lord was with him, and the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. His journey's going good now. He finds grace in his master's sight. According to verse 4, he's made overseer of the entire house, and everything is put into his charge. He was well favored, the Bible says in verse 6 of that chapter. But watch out, Joseph has a slippery slope right ahead. That slippery slope is Potiphar's wife. Day by day, according to verse 10, she continually tempts Jacob to sin. In fact, she goes so far as to grab a hold of him. But he put on his running shoes at that point and he fled that slippery slope. Potiphar's wife lied to her husband about Joseph and said that he had tried to force her. Naturally, her husband got very angry and then he threw Joseph into prison. Now stay with me on this path. I'm heading somewhere. If Potiphar's wife had never tempted Joseph and lied about it, then Potiphar would never have thrown Joseph into prison. Here the path levels out again. Although he is in prison, in Genesis 39:21 it says, "But the Lord was with Joseph, and showed him mercy, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison." You know, we might say, that's terrible that God let him go into prison. But is it? Stay with me and think with me for a minute. If Joseph never went into prison, he never would have interpreted the butlers' and the bakers' dreams that they had. And if he never would have interpreted their dreams, the butler would never have known that Joseph could interpret dreams. And if the butler had never met Joseph in prison, that means there was a reason he was there. If the butler had never met Joseph, he never would have known to tell Pharaoh about this guy Joseph he had met in prison that could interpret dreams. And if Pharaoh never met Joseph when he called him to come interpret his dream, Pharaoh would not have known that there was a famine coming. He never would have set Joseph up over all the land of Egypt. If Joseph was not ruler over the land of Egypt, there would have been no food stored up for Jacob, Joseph's father, and his brothers, who one day soon would become the 12 tribes of Israel. And if there was no food for Joseph's family, they never would have come to Egypt. And since they had to come to Egypt because it was the only place to find food, eventually it led to them restoring their relationship with Joseph. All these terrible things in Joseph's life led to his family's relationship being restored again. If that relationship was never restored between his family, we would never read the words that encourage us to keep on, even when our journey gets rocky, rough, dangerous, or even lonely. And thus we might never understand that God can take bad circumstances that we think are bad in our life to accomplish good. Those words are found in Genesis chapter 50, verses 19 through 20. And Joseph said unto them, Fear not, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, you thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring it to pass as it is this day, to save much people alive. And when I read those words, that whole story of Joseph just flashed through my mind. Joseph went from rejection to a ruler. But how did he get there? Through a lot of struggles, family jealousy, loneliness in prison, temptations, lies, rejection. But all those things, those bad things, worked together for his good. God had transformed the soot of human sin into a diamond of divine blessing. And he will do that in your life's journey. God will use your journey through life, all your struggles, your loneliness, any rejection, the bad things in our life, and he will work it out for our good. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose, Romans 8:28. Acts 7:9 says, And the patriarchs, moved with envy, sold Joseph into Egypt, but God was with him. So when you are discouraged by circumstances in your life, when you think you might be on the wrong path on your journey, remember God is with you, and he will work it all together for good, even the things that we think are bad. When you are tempted to question why God has ever brought this path into your life, remember Joseph.